ever wonder what it was really like to work with Steve Jobs? I mean, beyond the, visionary genius image we see in documentaries,
Yeah.
like the actual person in those, intense Apple meetings.
Right.
Today, we're going to go beyond the myth and get a glimpse of the man himself through the eyes of someone who worked directly with him.
Yeah.
Our source for this deep dive is a YouTube video
Okay.
featuring Hector Rodriguez, a tech entrepreneur
Mhm.
who sold his company to Apple and ended up reporting to Steve Jobs for a few intense years.
Wow.
It's pretty much a masterclass in leadership, whether you agree with his style or not.
Right.
So we're going to unpack what Jobs was actually like as a boss. What were his tactics?
Yeah.
Was he brilliant, brutal, or a bit of both?
Interesting.
And what can we learn from both his successes and his, let's call them, interesting management choices?
It's interesting you say interesting because the source material paints a picture of Jobs that's surprisingly complex.
Really?
Even intimidating, I'd say. For instance, there's this story about how in their first meeting,
Okay.
Jobs grills Rodriguez about his close relationship with his father.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Seems random, right?
Right. And then, didn't Rodriguez say that Jobs used that personal detail later on to motivate him?
He did.
I mean, was it truly motivational or just straight up manipulation?
It's hard to say, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, Jobs seemed to operate on a different level.
Yeah.
He was constantly absorbing these little details,
Right.
and then, boom, using them later to achieve his goals.
Wow.
I mean, was it strategic brilliance? Or was it a way of pushing people's buttons?
I don't know.
It's up for debate, but it definitely kept people on their toes.
Speaking of being on your toes.
Oh, yeah.
Rodriguez's colleague, each, actually pronounced eight, but spelled each,
Okay.
made the mistake of using the phrase lowest common denominator during a pitch meeting with Jobs.
Oh, no.
You can guess what happened next.
Total shutdown.
Total shutdown.
Yeah, Jobs despised that phrase. Oh, yeah, it represented everything he was fighting against at Apple.
Like what?
Mediocrity, settling for good enough.
Oh, I see.
Remember, Jobs built Apple on the idea of exceeding expectations.
Right.
Pushing boundaries, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to him, lowest common denominator was like nails on a chalkboard.
It makes sense.
It's fascinating, right?
Mm.
This seemingly small incident, it reveals a lot about Jobs' personality
Yeah.
and his impact on Apple's culture.
For sure.
This obsession with excellence, it permeated every level of the company.
Wow.
Every element, from the product design to the marketing language,
Interesting.
it all had to reflect that commitment to quality.
You can't argue with the results.
No, I mean, this pursuit of perfection, this
Yeah.
is what helped propel Apple to become one of the most successful companies in the world.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
You see this play out in how Jobs handled the acquisition of Rodriguez's company.
Oh, really?
He deliberately lowballed him,
What?
even after they had seemingly agreed on a price.
No way.
Classic Jobs.
Wow, he was a master negotiator.
Oh, yeah.
Knew how to use pressure tactics to his advantage.
Right.
Was it about getting the best possible deal? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But it was also a test, I think.
To test.
Jobs seemed to respect people who could stand their ground and fight for what they believed in.
Oh, interesting.
He wanted people on his team who weren't afraid to, challenge him.
So even after Rodriguez joined Apple, the tests continued.
They did.
He had to attend these infamous Tuesday meetings
Yeah.
with Jobs and the entire Apple executive team.
Ooh, talk about pressure.
Right.
Imagine having to constantly prove the value of your work to Steve Jobs week after week.
This was also a time when Apple was just starting to dominate the mobile market with the iPhone.
Oh, right.
And
Right?
Jobs was fiercely protective of that.
Makes sense.
He saw advertising as a potential threat.
Yeah, I can see why.
He didn't want anything to compromise the elegance and simplicity of Apple products. So Rodriguez had to constantly demonstrate how his advertising platform could be integrated seamlessly without disrupting the user experience.
That's a high-stakes game.
It really is, and there was no room for error.
You're telling me?
It's incredible how much we can learn from just these few anecdotes.
I know.
Jobs was a complex figure, a mix of brilliance and intensity.
He was.
But even in these seemingly small interactions,
Yeah.
we see the seeds of what made Apple so successful.
It's all connected, right?
Yeah.
His obsession with excellence, his demanding leadership style, his unwavering focus on the user experience.
Yeah.
These are all of the elements that contributed to Apple's rise to dominance.
Absolutely.
But it's important to remember that Jobs' approach wasn't without its flaws, as we'll see as we dig deeper into this deep dive.
Well said. Now, I know we're just scratching the surface here,
Yeah.
but I'm already finding this so fascinating.
Me too.
I'm curious to know what's standing out for you so far.
Oh, I'm curious to hear your initial reactions.
Right.
What resonates with you?
Okay.
What aspects of Jobs' approach, even at this stage of the story, would you find most challenging if you were in Rodriguez's shoes?
We'll come back to your thoughts in just a moment.
Okay.
But first, let's take a closer look at some other revealing anecdotes from Rodriguez's time working with Steve Jobs.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Steve Jobs. So far, we've seen how Jobs used personal details, right, to motivate his team,
Mm-hmm.
how he really reacted strongly against anything that even hinted at mediocrity,
Right.
and how he put immense pressure on his employees to perform at their absolute best.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It really is.
How all these seemingly isolated incidents, they all connect to this bigger picture of Jobs' leadership style
Yeah.
and his impact on Apple's culture.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that struck me was how Jobs seemed to constantly test people,
Oh, yeah.
even after they'd proven themselves.
Right, even after, acquiring Rodriguez's company, bringing him on board, Jobs still treated him like an outsider in some ways.
He did, didn't he? Like, he hadn't quite earned his stripes yet, at least not in Jobs' eyes.
That's right. There's that incident where Rodriguez's colleague used the phrase lowest common denominator, and Jobs just, went ballistic.
Total meltdown.
Even though Rodriguez wasn't the one who said it, he definitely felt the heat.
Oh, absolutely. Jobs had this, deep-seated belief in the Apple way of doing things.
The Apple way.
It was almost like a secret club, you know?
And then there's the story of how Jobs nearly tanked the entire acquisition deal just to shave a bit off the price.
Oh, my gosh, yes. Classic Jobs.
I mean, that must have been, nerve-wracking for Rodriguez.
It's such a classic example of Jobs' negotiation tactics, right?
Yeah.
He was not afraid to walk away from a deal.
Really?
Oh, if it meant compromising his principles or getting a better price, he was out. And it wasn't just about the money, right? It was about control, about establishing dominance, about showing everyone, who was really in charge.
Jobs was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers.
Right, like he was always thinking several moves ahead.
Always anticipating every possible outcome.
And it wasn't just in, business negotiation.
Yeah.
Rodriguez also shared a story about how Jobs was very private about his declining health.
Oh, right.
And even expressed annoyance that Rodriguez lived in his neighborhood.
Really?
Yeah, he was worried people would figure things out.
I mean, it's a reminder that even someone as powerful and influential as Steve Jobs had vulnerabilities and insecurities.
Right.
Makes him seem a little more human, don't you think?
It does. It humanizes him a bit, yeah. He clearly valued his privacy and wanted to maintain a certain image.
Especially as he faced his own mortality.
Yeah, he wanted to control the narrative, just like he controlled everything else in his world.
Speaking of control, let's talk about those infamous Tuesday meetings again.
Oh, yeah.
Rodriguez said they were brutal, with Jobs dissecting every detail, demanding perfection from everyone present.
I bet those meetings were terrifying.
Right. Can you imagine having to defend your work every week in front of Steve Jobs?
Talk about accountability.
Yeah.
But it also highlights something really crucial about his leadership style, right?
What's that?
He was intensely focused.
Focus.
He was present in every meeting, engaged in every conversation.
Mm.
He expected that same level of focus from everyone else.
It sounds exhausting, but also explains how he was able to achieve so much. He was relentless in his pursuit of excellence.
Totally. Like that saying, the difference between ordinary and extraordinary is that little extra.
Mm-hmm.
And Jobs demanded that extra from himself and everyone around him.
And he had a particular way of getting people to deliver that extra, right?
Yeah, he did.
Rodriguez said one of the most valuable lessons he learned from Jobs was to think like an Apple guy.
Oh, interesting. What does that even mean?
Which basically meant, stripping away all unnecessary complexity and focusing on just the core essence of an idea.
Ah, I see.
And Jobs didn't just want people to think differently.
Right.
He wanted them to communicate differently.
Oh, how so?
Rodriguez mentioned that Jobs hated presentations, filled with text.
Okay.
And he much preferred verbal explanations instead.
Really?
Yeah.
That's so interesting. So it was all about clarity, simplicity, and getting to the heart of the matter.
It's like he wanted people to truly understand the problem and the solution at like a fundamental level,
Yeah.
not just get lost in a sea of bullet points.
Precisely. And this emphasis on clear communication, it was another key factor in Apple's success, right?
Yeah.
By fostering an environment where everyone understood the core principles and goals,
Hmm.
Jobs was able to align his team and move forward with a shared vision.
It's amazing how everything connects back to those, those core principles we talked about earlier.
It is, isn't it?
It's like every anecdote, every interaction reveals another piece of the puzzle that was Steve Jobs.
It's true.
He was brilliant, demanding, controlling, visionary, a truly complex and fascinating figure.
He was. And it's this complexity, I think, that makes studying his leadership style so valuable.
Yeah,
There are lessons to be learned, both positive and negative.
you're absolutely right. Now, before we move on to the final part of our Steve Jobs deep dive,
Okay.
I want to hear from you again. What's resonating most with you so far? Have your initial thoughts about Jobs shifted at all?
Well, I'm also curious to know what you're taking away from this deep dive, right?
Yeah.
What aspects of Jobs' approach do you find most intriguing? And what would you find most challenging if you were in Rodriguez's position?
We'll be right back after a short break to discuss your reactions and wrap up our exploration of Steve Jobs' legacy.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Steve Jobs.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It really has. And, we've uncovered his demanding leadership style,
Yeah.
his laser-focused.
His obsession with simplicity
Mhm.
and his uncanny ability to just, push people to their limits.
And yet, through it all, there's this undeniable sense of admiration,
I'd agree.
even awe, I think, at what he accomplished.
It's true.
I mean, he built one of the most iconic companies in the world, revolutionized multiple industries,
Yeah.
and left behind a legacy that continues to, inspire and influence us even today.
It's true, but I keep coming back to this question. Would I have thrived working for someone like Steve Jobs?
Right.
It sounds exhilarating
Yeah,
and terrifying all at the same time.
that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And there's no easy answer.
Yeah.
I mean, it's clear that Jobs' approach had its downsides.
For sure.
He could be ruthless, controlling, and even cruel at times.
Yeah.
I mean, Rodriguez himself described feeling abused at certain points, even though he acknowledged learning a great deal from Jobs.
It's a fine line, isn't it, between pushing people to excel and pushing them too far? And Jobs seemed to walk that line with a swagger that would make most people nervous.
Yeah, it's almost like he enjoyed the tension, the
Mhm.
challenge of it all,
Right.
But it's also important to remember that this was a different time in the tech industry.
Yeah.
The stakes were incredibly high,
Uh-huh.
and Jobs felt immense pressure to deliver groundbreaking products
Yeah.
that would change the world.
He wasn't content with simply creating good products. He wanted to create masterpieces.
Exactly.
And he expected everyone around him to share that same level of passion and commitment.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another crucial aspect of Jobs' leadership,
Okay.
his unwavering belief in the intersection of liberal arts and technology.
Right.
He didn't just want to build gadgets. He wanted to create experiences that were both beautiful and functional, intuitive and inspiring.
Remember that quote where he said, Apple sits at the intersection of liberal arts and technology?
Oh, yeah.
That always stuck with me.
Me too.
It explains why Apple products have always had that certain something. Yeah.
That magic that sets them apart.
It was about more than just, technical specs.
Right.
Jobs understood that technology should serve humanity, not the other way around.
Right.
He wanted to create products that would enrich people's lives,
Yeah.
empower their creativity, and connect them to the world in meaningful ways.
And that's a legacy that continues to resonate today, right?
Oh, absolutely.
We see it in the sleek design of Apple products, the intuitive user interfaces,
Yeah.
the focus on simplicity and elegance.
It's undeniable, even years after his passing,
Yeah.
his influence.
It's a powerful reminder that one person
Yeah,
can make a profound difference.
they can.
Jobs' story is both a cautionary tale
Right.
and a source of inspiration.
I agree.
We can learn from his mistakes, his flaws,
Mm.
but we can also be inspired by his vision.